Good morning, good evening, good afternoon everybody. I hope you're all having a nice Saturday. It is Saturday today, isn't it? It's raining again today, so state of play has been called off. Today's video is about unrealistic expectations from life itself. And of course I am referring to Harry's loss of his court case to have the continued security that he had become accustomed to from when he was little, from when he was born. And the last video I did was about him losing the case. I think that was the last one I did. And then quite hotly followed, but on Graham's channel, because a lot of you had seen that a spokesperson for Harry had made an announcement that it was his intention to appeal against that decision. Now, just to follow on and repeat that, because I've subsequently had the advantage of watching another YouTube channel called The Art of Law. Any of you familiar with Black Belt Barrister Daniel? He has another channel with another gentleman called Alan Robertshaw. And I really enjoy Alan's videos. I enjoy Daniel's as well, but I really like Alan's laid-back approach. So I think it was last Wednesday, wasn't it, that Harry had had his case knocked back. The decision was no, Ravek had been totally reasonable in forming the conclusions that they had, and that he lost the case. And then he had a spokesperson, right? Not a fancy lawyer like when David Sherborne said the slaying dragons. A spokesperson had said that it was Harry's intention to appeal because he doesn't want preferential treatment, which was a really bizarre way of putting it, but he wants fairness. I mean, don't we all want? Nothing preferential about it. I'd like it, you'd like it, let's all have it. Come on, Ravek, you naughty meanies. So I put this video out explaining that although I am not a lawyer, I have no legal qualifications, so don't take my advice for anything, but it was my suspicion immediately after, when I saw quite a few of you in the comments on the previous video express concern that Harry was going to appeal and therefore it would be ongoing. I did explain that I would be very surprised if he were able to appeal without leave from the courts, permission from the courts, or new evidence coming forward, or that the judge made a wholly flawed decision, that it's not just up to Harry to stamp his foot and say, I'm appealing and we're all going to the Court of Appeal. Now, as I say, I've seen Alan Robertshaw, I've got to get his name right, Alan Robertshaw, and I will put a link in the description to that video. Now, he is a barrister. However, again, don't take YouTubers' legal advice. And Alan has a disclaimer where he's not responsible. He can't be held liable for anything that he's said. Anything you see or hear on the internet to do with legal advice is just general guidance, entertainment. If you really need a lawyer, then you need to go and instruct an actual lawyer, and then they may instruct a barrister on your behalf. And as Alan explained and confirmed my suspicions, that yes, there are some exceptions where people have an automatic right to reply. And he goes into that and explains that basically criminal actions in the magistrates, if you're found guilty, you have an automatic right to appeal to the higher Crown Court. But you do risk a higher sentence as well, or a worse outcome. But Alan explains all of that much better than me, so link in the description to that. So it's not up to Harry to say, well, I didn't like the decision of the court, I'm going to appeal. All he can do is get a spokesperson to declare an intention to appeal. That does not mean that he will be given leave to appeal. Very different thing. So I believe, and also I believe that if that were genuinely the case, that the first thing that Harry would have done probably prior to the outcome, you know, there would have been discussions normally, I would imagine, with a client, lawyer, barristers. What if the decision goes against me? What grounds might we have for appeal? So, you know, they might have already started to consider this. And even if they hadn't, and then the outcome as it turned out went against him, then if the intention is truly to appeal, then you talk to your lawyer in confidence confidence and you say, I would like to discuss options for appeal, and you would take it through that process, and then at a later date the public would become aware that such an appeal, if an appeal were granted or if an application for appeal, etc, etc. So to put that statement out, bam, straight away after the decision, that was literally just chest beating. That was public relations chest beating, and I'm pretty sure it was just a spokesperson for Harry. May not even have been Harry, could have been Meghan, could have been just their... I doubt if their PR people would actually go out on a limb, say something so drastic, so I have to believe that that came from Harry himself. What an idiotic thing to do. It's like these sort of feeble statements that people make. I'm going to form a legal team. I'm going to sue someone for defamation, when they clearly have no grasp of the basics of defamation or the two different categories of libel and slander. They just put these statements out. I hear this sort of thing where people put these stupid statements out saying, I'm going to sue for defamation, I'm going to sue for slander, I'm going to sue for libel. Basically, and a lot of people make the mistake as well. Again, I'm not a lawyer. That the difference is that slander is spoken and libel is written. As I understand it, actually, slander is a temporary, momentary slur, where you might say something, but something that is recorded on a video, a tape recording, or in written form is the permanent, and so is libel. But that again, there's actually a specialist. There are specialist lawyers just on those particular definitions as well. So when you hear, for example, anybody maybe in a pub, or maybe another YouTuber, and I'm not thinking of any particular YouTuber, or when anybody says, I'm going to get a team of lawyers together, I'm going to sue someone for defamation, there are many things to consider. How much damage? Is it a classification of defamation? Have they actually been named and identified and suffered damage as a result of that? It's a minefield, an absolute minefield. So next time you're sitting in the pub and you hear someone say, I'm going to get a team of lawyers, I'm going to sue for defamation, they'd better have about £100,000 tucked up their back pocket for a start. Defamation is not an accessible thing to the majority of us. It's a very difficult and tricky thing, and something that has to be carefully considered. So when someone's had a couple in the pub and they come out with this sort of nonsense, please take it all with a pinch of salt. And just a minor factoid, trivia, like for example, if someone calls someone else a name, like, I think you're a bit of an anchor, that's not defamation. They just don't like you and they're calling you a name. Right, so unrealistic expectations then brings me to, of course, the horse's mouth. And that's where I read in here that he said that from when he was a little boy, he wasn't allowed to go anywhere without 3 personal protection officers. And he's basically asking no more, no less than that. Well, but I found a couple of little quotes in here which I thought might amuse you. So I've folded the pages and hopefully they are still here. I mean, he's not thought through, as you can imagine, an awful lot. So on the cost of security, yes, I think he does have a good idea of how much private security costs. Probably didn't when he decided, before he left the royal family, when he made the decision to leave the royal family, when they put out their announcement, but I'm pretty darn sure that he has a really good grasp now of how much private security costs. The probably most bizarre and ludicrous thing that I think I have read in Spare is this quote. It's basically where they had gone for Christmas in Canada and they'd borrowed somebody's house, I don't know, Russian millionaire something person, and no one knew where they were. And he's discussing this, and this is really what created, so he says, was his decision to leave the royal family. And it's very short. Brief as it was, that taste of freedom had got us thinking. What if life could be like that all the time? What if we could spend at least part of each year somewhere far away, you know, in a far, far away land, in this day and age with the internet, somewhere far away, still doing work for the Queen, but beyond the reach of the press? Well, where would that be, Harry? Mars? Venus? The moon? Free from the British press, free from the drama, free from the lies, but also free from the supposed public interest that was used to justify the frenzied coverage of us. The question was, where? That's an excellent question, Windsor. That is an excellent question. Especially when, and I am going to go out on a limb here, I deeply suspect that it's Harry's wife herself who leaks. So wherever he goes, it's going to be discovered. That is my belief. That appears to me over the last 4 years what has happened. She seems to have a pet pap in her pocket or a dialer pap on speed dial. They seem to know all kinds of random information all the time. I mean, I am going out on a legal limb there, but I think even South Park kind of worked that one out. I think most people can see that. And yes, I have seen all this latest thing of the New York car chase. And I mean, it's so pitiful. It is so embarrassing. It is so humiliating and so grasping at straws. It's really not even worth covering. Well, I mean, I only need to say 2 words really, don't I? South Park. Or is it one word? South Park. I don't know. I'm not a big viewer. Now, the other interesting thing that's in Spare, so Harry's there trying to figure out whereabouts on planet Earth he could go where they don't have the internet. All I can say is he must be now thinking, darn Elon Musk for inventing that blasted thing called Starlink, where you can even have internet in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean. Starlink, you can have internet in the middle of the Sahara Desert. There is no escape. The internet is everywhere. That's rather the point. We have internet everywhere. So where, Harry? Where? And then when there's the dialer pap, but so the cost of security from Harry Windsor's point of view. Lloyd, who was his then security guard, was pleading with his superiors at home, trying to get them to at least postpone the date when he and his team pulled out. He showed me the emails. He wrote, "We just can't leave them here." The person at the other end wrote, "The decision has been made. As of 31st of March, they're by themselves." I scrambled to find new security. I spoke to consultants, gathered estimates. I filled a notebook with research. The palace directed me to a firm which quoted me a price, $6 million a year. I slowly hung up. So, now, as far as work, and them generating themselves an income, because this is really a very interesting life in sort of home economics, isn't it? A problem that we all encounter from the day we're born, really, and our parents. How to survive in the big wide world. Well, you need an income. And then you have to calculate your outgoings, hopefully will be less than your income, so you can have a little bit of savings. But it astonishes me, even to this day actually, me myself, if you have some savings and you don't have an income, how quickly that money goes down. I mean, it still astonishes me, and always has. The money just literally disappears on nothing these days. Well, I suppose it always has been the case. It just disappears, and I remember my parents saying the same thing, in the odd occasion when they get lucky, a bit of a windfall, or they had some savings, and then they would see how fast and on. So can you imagine, it's like kids when they leave home, as you guys all know. Our 2 have recently flown the nest and are going through this, and have been going through this for the last year, where first thing is, oh my God, rent. Rent is the big one. The cost of food, mum and dad. Suddenly they're not living with the bank of mum and dad, and that's when they discover that they've got to work out, how much are my wages? I can no longer afford the treats and the things I could when I was living at home with mum and dad rent free. And so I've got to calculate and work out what I can and can't afford, and budget and stuff like that. And lots of young people are going through that all the time. And middle-aged Prince Harry also. It won't just be that he's figured out that he's got to pay for his own security. Yes, that'll be a whopping bill. His legal fees, that will be another whopping bill, one of which he brought in, he did all that by himself, all these lawsuits. But then I doubt if the cost of food was ever a consideration because, in the grand scheme of things for Windsor, unless they're eating expensive stuff that's being shipped in. But I mean, for example, things like, a garden doesn't just look after itself. It has to have human beings known as gardeners who look after it. Good God, do you know how much the wages of gardeners are? Did you know that gardens grow and they get unkempt and they need a human being and a team of them? Do you know how much water costs? I mean, I would imagine the last 4 years have been an absolute helter-skelter of learning curves for old Windsor. And I am not of the school of thought that he is going to be bailed out financially by his family, so to speak. I am of the school of thought that, and put aside the inheritances, and I know Princess Anne and all that, and the age and trust funds and the Queen Mother and all of that, I know. I am of the school of thought that what is most likely to happen, rather than the Windsors have the embarrassment any further, and believe me, it can get a lot worse. It can get a lot worse than this. True embarrassment of Skid Row of Prince Harry will be some sort of allowance, which can be then tightly controlled and will go hand in glove with controlling behaviour, etc., etc. That's the way I believe that it's going. Something quite realistic along the lines of something like £100,000 a month, on the understanding that there have to be certain stipulations, certain behaviour, certain controls, certain decorum, and perhaps a little property somewhere in the United Kingdom where he could live out potentially his days with his children. I can see that type of arrangement on the horizon because what was it he claimed he had? 33 million left to him from his mother. I wouldn't imagine there's very much left of that. In fact, I'd go further than that and imagine he's probably in debt. And people do give huge lines of credit to members of royal families, especially the Windsors, because of who they are and because there is a belief by the creditor that the ultimate Windsors will bail them out, which is not necessarily the case. Well, I'd like to hear your thoughts and opinions on where you think, being grown adults, presumably you've lived on a budget, you've had to sort things out. We have children, grandchildren, perhaps your parents were good at managing money, bad at managing money. I think Prince Harry is an exercise in bad money, bad judgment, especially putting out a statement of that nature that it is his intention to appeal an extremely reasonable decision made by the court because they felt Ravek had been extremely reasonable. Just throw more money, more legal money after a problem. And as Alan Robertshaw's video is called, his appeal it's hopeless, it's abysmal, it's ludicrous, laughable. I'll go out on a limb and say I don't think he'd be given leave by the court to appeal. And even if he was, I don't think he'd succeed. I went out on a limb about a year ago to say the same. I think that you guys don't have too much to worry about, really. Calm down. If anybody's stressed about the thought of Harry returning as a working royal, I don't think that's going to happen. Harry getting any influence, I can see he's desperate to get back in, but no, I don't believe that's going to happen. I don't believe there's going to be an appeal. I think what you're going to see is like a further shrinking and downsizing. Because what I do notice, especially in recent days with the news and social media, people get very upset, very wound up over all kinds of subjects, political subjects, and then that has a throw-on effect in elections and various parts. Well, it seems to me social media is driving everybody crazy. And when you just sit back and look at things in the cold light of day with a clear head, you can see quite clearly the direction that this road is going. He cannot be left completely to his own devices for very much longer, because it will create embarrassment. When I talk about embarrassment, I mean on the level of the two Edys. Anyone not familiar with the story of Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy Onassis had an aunt and a cousin who lived in the Hamptons at a place called Grey Gardens, and they hit hard times financially. but they were reasonably close relatives of one of the richest women in the world, Jackie O. And along came a couple of documentary makers in the, I think, 1970s, went into this mansion which was in ruck and ruin with cats peeing everywhere. I mean, they were an adorable couple of characters, the two Edys. But nevertheless, they did, I've watched the documentary, and they did appear to me to be eating what they call pate, but I'm fairly confident was cat food on toast. They were wearing really quite strange outfits, and they were on very, very hard times. And of course the documentary was huge, much to the embarrassment of Jackie O, and she and Onassis paid for some people to go in and clean up the mansion. So although it's not the responsibility of the Windsors in a way, you know, it's not, they didn't make this problem, but they do to a certain extent have to make sure that there is not a Grey Gardens 2ED situation crop up maybe in a few years' time where Harry and Meghan could be spreading cat food on toast in a dilapidated... I mean, when he says, where can I find on planet Earth a far, far away land where the, you know, the press are never going to talk about us again? Well, California, of course, yeah. Why not Montecito, California? That's the first place I'd go as well. So anyway, a continuing and ever unfolding story. Go and watch The Art of Law. It's a very good YouTube channel. And that's the thing, people sort of say things and declare things about law which are not necessarily factually correct or can be highly misleading. It's always worth, especially when statements come out from Montecito, from Harry and Meghan, they're designed for effect. So, you know, always take a deep breath, sit back and think, hang on a minute, you know, what's actually going on here? Anyway, enough of me whittering on today. Thank you very much for listening, and look forward to seeing you in the next one and in the comments below.